Before we introduce one specific topic of the syllabus, I want you to get familiar with the format in which we move up in the classes. Those are generally the 4 steps that we follow in the class. As I was mentioning in that workshop, the first half hour of every class we will be talking about some kind of new terms that would help you in understanding the discussions in the forthcoming classes. We may also introduce some kind of videos to you portraying lifestyle of one specific culture group. Sir, whenever we watch a video or some kind of an interview of an anthropologist or something that is aired in the class, you'll have to take it religiously when it comes to taking a note from there. Once you take note by watching the video, listening to the interview, etc., we will have a small summary talk on that particular topic. So whatever we do in these kinds of bits and pieces of efforts, that is basically to help you understand the topic and own the syllabus, actually own the discipline. Because in order to establish that kind of a link with altogether a new discipline that you haven't come across so far, it requires an effort. So I strongly believe in particular ways through which we introduce the discipline to the student. So we would be starting with those half-an-hour exercises, and once we do a considerable amount of syllabus, we will also be picking up certain questions, some of them from the previous papers, and some we devise questions and try discussing. And then, of course, we will be having set syllabus for that day. We will be discussing them, and as and when possible necessary, we will be dictating stuff to you so that you note down things. What's your opinion on your own writing speed? Your own writing speed, you are happy with your own writing speed? Writing. How many words you write generally per minute? 100. Check that speed. That is also a very vital information you will have to build on. See to it that you write about 22 to 25 words per minute. Sensible words, meaningful words. That's the average one. You can try this back home, a trial of checking how many words you are writing. In the initial exercise, you can write whatever you feel like for a 5-minute, 10 minutes time, and then you can see per minute how many you are writing. In the class, when I'm dictating, I go at a moderate speed, so that you would be able to pick up your speed for the exam also. And then, of course, we would be suggesting you certain things, what to read, from where to read. Once you finish your registration process, once I get your email IDs, I will start sending you the soft copies to begin with. Even before you get the printed stuff, you will start getting the soft copies, so that you would start reading that particular stuff. So I think by the time you get your printed note, it will take about 10 to 12 days of time. In the meantime, we will start off with this kind of small papers being sent to you, and you would be writing. This is basically the format. And at the end of the class, I think all of you will be given some kind of a planner of this kind, wherein though it is actually devised for keeping in view the general studies thing, but I thought I would use it for your optional also. We enter the topic that we have studied on that particular date, and then the sources, so that on a day-to-day basis, you will keep a record of what you have read, studied in that class, because it's all possible that After 24 hours, nothing remains here. Something that you physically write down will only. So let me take you to the class of the day. We are starting with that. Some of us have already seen the syllabus the other day. Anthropological thought. Repeating what I said in that class, as the name suggests, this particular topic aims at influencing your thinking process, because it has been a fanciful thing in the exam. He occasionally mentions what's an anthropological perspective of some XYZ issue. So it is a puzzling thing that maybe there is a special way of thinking which may be called an anthropological thinking. So even before you start jumping into the other topics in the syllabus, we do this so that you start accommodating yourself in what we call thinking like an anthropologist. But before I do all that stuff, I would want to begin with a couple of pictures for you. Just look at this picture. What's happening? Somebody is lined up down on the floor and people are going around. What is it that is lying down there? That is that island. Pigs are being lined up, and so many onlookers there, as if they are trying to choose which one to jump on, or maybe which one will be gifted to them. And those are the two people. Several bunches of anthropologists actually had studied this particular thing, which looks to be surprising. What is it that they are doing with so many pigs? Anything that comes to your mind, they must be doing this. Anything that comes to your mind. Looking at a picture, we get a feel. What is the feel that you are getting from there? What must be going on? Selling. Aur bataएं? Worshipping. You are killing the pig and after that you are worshipping. Maybe possible. जिंदा तो वो कुछ सुन नहीं रहा, तो मार कर ही सुनाएंगे. You have slaughtered and must have sacrificed to the gods. Then later you will sit and eat the prasad. Kind of. Anything else? Anything else? Competition of how many you are killing? The biggest one is Acha, maybe. Yeah, could be. The biggest one that you must have killed. Pig feast. Eating of the pig, pork, rather. So the two names out there, those are a couple of anthropologists who have worked in that particular island, in that population, which is actually part of those Pacific islands. You must also be studying geography. You can back home see for that location Vanuatu Islands, those Y-shaped islands. These islands have been one of the most interesting areas for the earliest anthropologists. And even today, they are actually helping people to do a lot of research and field work when it comes to anthropology discipline. Now, I'll go back to this. So whenever I am showing examples of this kind, and whenever we are giving certain names of the people or of the groups that are being studied, it is religiously to be taken down somewhere so that we would come back on them. Huffman and Harcombe. I think those are the first two names that I'm introducing in the class for you. I still haven't spoken of the people who are being studied. There's so many tribal communities of that region that indulge in this kind of a festive occasion. So I would start my talk with the story about them. I'm sure you would enjoy all the stories because most of the time we would be spending here narrating stories. So I got several prizes in the school in the storytelling. I continue with that job back home and here also. So you enjoy the stories, and from the stories you pick up the facts that are necessary for your exam. I told you in the workshop that every example, every fact that we give in the class has some kind of utility somewhere in the syllabus when you are taking up the questions for the exam. I am naming the first tribe for you, called Sarah. Is it visible to the last? Is the size okay? T is silent, we call it Sembaga. Sembaga is one of the Polynesian tribes that is known for what our friend had used this word, pig feasts. People have written reams of information on the pig feasts. Why should somebody go for a pig feast of so many numbers? You can see there, easily you can see about 100 being, or many more. Success? Excess. Okay, you have so many. You need not have to wait for excess number to emerge in order to have some kind of a feast. You can actually go for a feast even when the numbers are small. But then they go for particular numbers. I'll give you a brief account of them and then take you forth. One of the first anthropologists who had studied Sembagan society was called Roy Rappaport. This was one of the first persons who had studied pig feasts from the perspective of culture studies in anthropology. He was narrating this. See, when somebody gives a story, it is based on the time at which he must have visited those people, or the kind of feel that he must have gone when he had seen them. The story that you are writing today need not necessarily be true till eternity. I hope you are following what I am saying. We have read history that was written at different points of time. So if a historian was describing one particular nation or one particular population, the narration changes with time. So keep this in the back of your mind, because at a later point of time we see somebody else going back to Sembaga and seeing that the same thing is not existing anymore. Because as we all know, change is inevitable and it goes on happening. With technology, with time, with necessity, change has to happen in the lifestyle. I'm still not using any technical words there. So when Roy Rappaport was studying Sembaga, he was bringing out certain very vital things there. See, these are the things that he must have observed, others did not observe. Or what he did not observe, others must have observed. Now I am sticking to his narration alone. Sembaga is actually a pastoral society. Pastoral, you understand, right? They live on some kind of livestock. They are basically pig rearing population. And they have this very strong belief. See, there are certain things that exist parallelly. One is they are pastoral pig rearing community. And they have one particular kind of social institution one particular kind of social institution called polygyny. So we will be explaining these things to you. So let me say this, sir. In the beginning of your course, for about a week or so, you will be learning several new terms. Things look like, okay, we are doing things in bits and pieces in a rather unstructured way, but you'll have to understand that out of the unstructured thing, we will try to lay down foundation for a structural reading. I said to you in that class, you can start your syllabus from anywhere. From wherever you start, you will be getting new words. So it's like we are trying to introduce a vocabulary to you. Many times what, Hanji sir? Sir?
Because of those, we can't see that. What are you writing?
Where do you want me to write? Should I write on the right side or should I switch on the lights? Write on the screen. Okay, I was looking at something else, Okay, fine. ठीक है. Public demand ఏం చేస్తాం? Anyways. I was there somewhere. Yeah. Rappaport reports that this particular tribe of Sembaga, one is pastoral. The second characteristic that he identifies is it is a polygynous community. So first I will settle with this polygyny and then go forth. Most of the time in the mainstream, we find, at least if you are looking at mainstream Hindu society, mainstream Christian society, we find that people generally go for monogamy. How many would want to have? Want is different from what is actually permitted for you. In monogamy, sir, I am introducing you certain symbols. This symbol is for male and this is for female. And this equality symbol indicates marriage, though we understand that they are never equal in marriage. We are, in the future, we will be talking about things like this, whether they should be equal. If at all you look for both of them to be equal, what could be the dangers that are involved? We are already feeling those dangers in the society when you say that there have to be women rights kind of a thing. And I didn't say much, but we'll hold on for that. This is monogamy. One for one. Acha, is it permitted in Hindu society that after this, you understand that, right? After divorce, can this happen? These are 1 and 2, they can go with 3 and 4. A remarriage. Or when this happens, he died, he got killed, or she killed him, whatever. 1, 2. Is it okay? How many days will he bear with her? These are the various types of monogamies. At a particular point of time, you can have a single partner. So I want you to know this, that in this particular subject, it is very, very important to remember to memorize definitions. If you're not memorizing in the same words as the thinker must have defined, doesn't matter, at least you should be able to provide the essence of it in the right words. So in monogamy, what happens is, monogamy is that type of marriage system wherein at a single point of time, an individual would have one single partner. Did you understand? That is monogamy. Monogamy is, at a point of time, an individual will have a single partner. When I am saying that at a point of time you can have a single partner, meaning at different points of time you can have different people. Are you fine, sir, in the class? Okay. Now, these variants, we call them serial monogamy. One after the other. Serial monogamy. But then, at any point of time, you are loyal to only one. That's very interesting. At a single point of time, you are loyal to a single individual, but your loyalty changes from time to time. But never at a single point of time your loyalty is divided. I am using a very interesting word here called loyalty, which we will be examining later. Now this is serial monogamy. And then there is another variant also, maybe I would introduce that term also, that is lifetime monogamy. Lifetime monogamy is whether she is alive, he is alive, dead, whatever, you should be happy with only one that fellow. So even if this happens, she should remain that way. Suppose this happens, he should remain all alone. Something like Lord Rama. But we know that it's possible only for the gods, not for the humans. This is lifetime monogamy. When it comes to the other variants, there is one term called polygamy. What we mean by polygamy is an individual can have more than one partners simultaneously. An individual can have more than one partner simultaneously. I am not describing whether it is male having more or female having more. In polygamy, an individual can have more than one partner simultaneously. There can be different variants. I am only introducing two names here because I will have to address what he was talking about, Sembaga. One is polyandry, the other is called polygyny. Polyandry and polygyny. What we popularly see and at which cultural characteristic we are not really surprised is polygyny. It is that practice wherein a male can have more than one female partners simultaneously. So it is not one single female, but you have a series of them, a list of them. He is wedded to them simultaneously. It may be that all of them in a bunch are getting married to him, or maybe that one after the other he is marrying them. All those variants will come to you in the later classes, but here we are trying to understand the word polygyny. A male parallelly at the same time has more than one female partners. I am very clear in my definition. I am saying that more than one female partner. It may be possible that some of them, that may also be there, but I am not considering them as such right now. This is polygyny. Polyandry is where the female has more than one partners simultaneously. That is polyandry. Sir, at any point of time in the class you have a problem, you raise your hand. If you don't understand or you are getting bored, you want something else to be discussed, you are not really liking what we are speaking, we have several stories, no? Or maybe you are feeling sleepy, you raise your hand, I will do the necessary. Classes are the best lullabies that you can have. Is the difference clear, sir? Understand these words, polyandry and polygyny. Now I will go into further variants and then close the topic here. We'll go to the other one. Within polyandry there can be variants. Here also there can be variants. One could be Sir, I am trying to write with a big font, but it will take some time to get used to bigger letters. Within polygyny, there can be sororal polygyny, it can be non-sororal polygyny. What we mean by sororal polygyny is a man's wives are sisters. That is the definition. A man's wives are sisters. Those are the sisters. That is the symbol to indicate that they are siblings. Whether it is male sibling or female sibling, that is how. So if you have to mention that there is a brother and a sister, that's how you would mention. Those are the siblings. So a man's wives are siblings, that is sororal polygyny. And in the non-sororal variant, a man's wives need not be sisters, and this is how we represent it. A man's wives need not be sisters in non-sororal polygyny. क्या यार लिख ही नहीं रहे हो? You don't want to? और देखते जब लिखना हो तब लिखें. May not be. A man's wives may not be sisters in the case of non-sororal. नहीं ये सारे चीज तो आपको मतलब, that's what I was saying in that class. When we are discussing certain things, explaining things, you keep on taking your running note. Because in the formal dictation, whatever we describe for improving your understanding may not be dictated. We would be answering especially one particular topic, and mind it, sir, in the first couple of classes there will not be a formal dictation. We'll be introducing several things. We are trying to bring you into the class physically, psychologically, no? Sororal, non-sororal. Now, coming to polyandry, there are several others there. One we call fraternal polyandry, non-fraternal, the other we call familial. Sir, I am only giving the terms and trying to tell you what they mean. We are not going into the exercises of who studied and where exactly, what kind of societies have these kind of characteristics. Those will come eventually. Here we are only trying to get you into the subject by making you familiar with certain terms. Fraternal polyandry, non-fraternal and familial. Fraternal polyandry is a female's husbands or brothers. So when you are drawing this bracket, it indicates that the entire block is wedded to her. If I am removing this particular bracket, it means that he is wedded to her alone. But we want to communicate that this entire group is married to him, or that entire group of males is married to that female. So fraternal polyandry is females' husbands are brothers. This is non-fraternal. A female's brothers need not be, a female's husbands need not be brothers. There is another one there, which is all the more interesting and confusing, amusing. I'll draw, you try to figure out what it is. Familial polyandry. This you understand, right? This is okay? Wife and husband, that is the son. So this indicates succession. Now, there's somebody here. That is familial polyandry, where a female is wedded to father and son simultaneously. Understanding undali జీవితంలో, accommodation, understanding. So those are certain terms, sir. This has been found, maybe there is also there somewhere, but the term I did not come across such a term. For this, there is a term. So if there is no term for something, the possibility of its existence is a question. Now, Sambaga have polygyny. Sambaga have polygyny, meaning that a male has more than one wife simultaneously. And there's an interesting belief system there. You will have to listen to this statement very carefully. Sambaga believe that more are the females, more are the pigs. More are the females that you have, more will be the pigs. It doesn't mean that the females are giving birth to the pigs, it's not that way. In that pastoral society of Sambaga, the job of taking care of the pigs is mostly of the female. So one other question that might come to your mind is, if more are the females, more are the pigs, is it necessary that you should marry alone? You may hire the females, or you may have a large number of female children, your own or adopted, whatever, so that the pigs can be taken care. But then they had made a choice of this. So in anthropology, we are going to see different kinds of choices people make. Many times the choice that we make is difficult for others to understand. Why is it that you made this choice? There may be a historical reason, there may be some kind of an economic reason, or there may be some kind of a driving force, there may be a religiously ordained decision there. Because of certain circumstances, you must have taken this particular stand, this particular decision. They decided that let us own the female. If it is the woman being taken up as a wife, she may not be demanding a regular wage from you. If at all you are hiring somebody, wages would become a difficulty. And then if it is the sister, she may not be there with you permanently. She may be wedded to somebody else who is in competition with you. He also would want to have more number of wives. Are you following what I am saying? So on a regular basis, whatever we are talking in the class, you try to apply to your own society, to your own life, things will be much more comfortable in understanding. It is not simply that. He was giving the entire story of the Sembaga, wherein he was describing on what occasions they would come up with these kinds of feasts and what is the intention behind the feast. The basic intention behind the feast is that the young man there, or reasonably middle-aged fellow there, he throws up this party of pig feast so that he would get an acceptance by the people as a political leader. And it is not simply the feast that he's giving. It is like, take biryani and give a vote. I think that's very easy to understand. So he's throwing a party so that people would come to him, see him, not only the pigs that he is giving for a feast, he is also exhibiting the females that he is owning. So one side there are females being exhibited, one side the pigs. So it is to show that, see how many females that I own, and see also my pigs. You see the power in me now. It's very easy to understand. When in the mainstream society where you have monogamous societies, monogamous families, getting a mastery over one female is a difficult thing. When he is able to be a master of so many females, it is not less than a testimony to the rest of the people that, see, when I can control so many females, I can face any problem and do things for you. Is that okay? This is the reality of life. Having a control over one female is a very difficult thing. By the way, any married people here? 1, 2, good numbers. Thank you so much. We'll use you in our classes. Now, that is the very first study, the name that I have introduced, Roy Rappaport, Sembagan Society. Now, once you have taken anthropology, I have to talk a bit about, actually for this problem I don't write where I exhibit. Let me take you to the origins of anthropology. So the topics that we are going to talk about now will be, one is origins of anthropology. Secondly, we will talk about the trends in anthropological thought. Those are the two major topics of the day. When we do that, we will be discussing certain terms to you. The terms that I am going to focus on in today's lecture, you may take down these words so that when we are describing these things, they will be explained. Ethnology or ethnology, however you want to pronounce. Hanji sir, you're not, I'm not audible. I'm about to do that, don't worry. Hanji ma'am. Once again ma'am. See, we will be examining the kind of reasons that prompt people to go for such kind of social institutions. One could be that there is a highly unequal numbers there. Maybe there are more of females and less number of males. That may drive people to go for polygyny, or more number of males and less females. You will have to be compromised with polyandry. And coming to this particular situation, it is not necessary that the entire society will be polygynous. It is not necessary that the entire society is polygynous. It may be only a privilege of the few. meaning the more powerful, the more well-to-do, are only reserving that right of having access to more number of females. For example, if we look at the Hindu society largely is monogamous. It is largely monogamous when it comes to the humans. But you look at the gods, they are not monogamous. Most of the gods that we have in Hinduism, they possess more than one wives or females or concubines, whatever you call. We are lesser mortals, so we have access to only one. They are the gods. That is the privilege gods have. I think I addressed your query. Will you come back to me after the class? Because one is, with mic you are not able to hear me. Without mic it is difficult for me. When I am speaking, my mouth only works, my ears don't work. Sir, there are 4 here. Ethnology, ethnology, ethnology. The other is called ethnography. The other is ethnocentrism. Are you having your syllabus document with you? Chapter 2, paper 1. And one more thing I'll have to say this. Every day you carry the syllabus document to the class. To know that yes, whatever we are speaking in the class is there in the syllabus. That confidence is very important. Chapter 2, paper 1. Run through 2.1, 2.2. As you are going down, you would see 2 terms there. Ethnocentrism versus, cultural relativism. Ethnocentrism versus cultural relativism. Now, so these are the 4 terms that we will be looking at in today's class. There are many occasions wherein simply these terms were asked, like ethnocentrism, cultural relativism, or a combination of them were asked in the exam. I would first explain to you the first 2 terms, then keep the story going with the origins. And these definitions you'll formally make a note as I tell you. Ethnology, make a note of the definition. Ethnology. A detailed description of a culture group primarily on comparative lines, which occasionally results in ethnocentric writings. Did you write the whole thing? Ethnology is comparative writing, a description about a culture group primarily with a comparative approach, and that might result in what is called ethnocentric writing. This must not have been clear to you, but still we will go ahead with writing, then we will explain. The second word there, ethnography. Detailed description of a culture group. without comparison. Without comparison. Also take the third one. Fourth one I will reserve for the future. Ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism. A belief that one's own culture is superior to the others. Now read the three terms to yourself, three definitions. Ethnology, a detailed description of a culture group primarily comparatively that may result in ethnocentric writings. Ethnography is detailed description without comparison. Ethnocentrism is a belief that one's own culture is superior to the others. Now, keeping these things in mind, we will go forth. See, most of the time, we are ethnocentric. Most of the time, we are ethnocentric. Because from whichever social strata we come, we always believe that we are superior to the others. Generally, it goes by the belief that whatever we do is right and what others do is wrong. Whatever you believe in is superior. If others have a belief, that may be a superstition. Your beliefs are beliefs, other beliefs are superstitions. Your beliefs are rational, others' beliefs are irrational. I'm not naming a community, I'm not naming a nationality or a religion or a caste group, whatever. Most of the time we believe that whatever we do is right and the others is wrong. Now keep that in mind. Now with that, we would go to the origins of anthropology. With a brief introduction that I started to give in the opening lecture itself, this journey, this study of anthropology, the emergence of anthropology had begun with the colonial masters. So when these people were actually, and I'm talking about a time of late 18th century or early 19th century when the Westerners, primarily the British, were trying to rule the rest of the globe. And at some places, maybe Germans were trying to do the same. At some other places, French were trying to do the same. But they could not parallel the length and breadth of the British. So most often, anthropology is seen as the given of the British colonial rule. Hanji sir, it's not? Doesn't matter. I'm still talking. We will come to those words. Don't worry. Or maybe for your satisfaction. Is that fine? Huh? I have written two words there. Esoteric, E-S-O-T-E-R-I-C. The second one I've written there is arcane, A-R-C-A-N-E. We are about to discuss about them. The basic meaning is that when we say esoteric, it is something like a discipline that can be studied by only a few people. It can be studied only by a few people, and it can be understood only by a few people. When we say that something can be understood only by a few people, we call it arcane. Anthropology was initially believed to be a discipline that has the traits of being arcane, being esoteric, meaning that can be studied only by a few people, that can be understood only by a few people. So this whole thing started with the colonial fellows who were trying to rule different parts of the world that did not have similar cultures. Many times they were shocked, they were surprised looking at the way people lived in the other side of the globe. From this curiosity emerged the need to understand them. See, what happens is that many times when we read history, I'm not trying to point at a weakness of the history writing, etc. As you grew, you must have come across these statements when you're studying history that, see, we are in this poor condition economically or whatever because of the colonial fellow, because he looted us, or because something damaging was done by them, and hence we are having this particular kind of economic or social or whatever conditions. Now, taking that as a statement, underlying statement, I'm trying to bring these things. When the colonial fellow was trying to rule the less known cultures, distant regions, isolated, underdeveloped, or eastern societies or southern societies, where he found that the cultures were really not simply different, but they were shocking. It is here that I would want to give the second significant name. So you can actually see per day how many newer names that you are coming across. And don't worry about memorizing. That's not your job. Making you remember things will be my job. Many times what happens is, when so many times we are repeating the things in the class, we are trying to make you recall in the class, automatically you'll remember, you'll learn anthropology unknowingly. Within a week's time, you start feeling like an anthropologist. So don't worry. My only request to you is just chill out, be happy, keep listening to whatever is being said in the class. If at all you feel like laughing at the stuff, you can laugh. Otherwise, you can simply keep listening to it, and things will naturally start going inside. They would get internalized in your body and mental physics. So don't worry much. But that is the kind of orientation that must have been given by some of the historical writings. See, this was the British fellow was like this, and hence we are like this. When they were looking at all these kinds of different cultures, from within the British community, there were certain scholars, certain administrators, certain researchers or travelers who started getting into this curiosity of knowing why these cultures are the way they were. And not all of them were antagonistic to the people whom they were ruling. Many times we saw people who were sympathetic to the native, or who wanted to live with the native, or some of them even got married to the native. We will also see some of the anthropologists who got married to the natives, not once but more than once. That luxury is there in India. Now here, that was a time when the British were ruling. That was a time when Christian missionaries were also traveling across. And if at all you had read history properly, you should be able to recall that when the company rule was there, company did not want to interfere into the religion. So company did not want their missionaries to go and propagate religion. And it was only after the crown took over the power, we see that increasingly open work of the missionaries had started. On this weekend, if possible, you try to watch this particular movie called Candle in the Dark. or a short movie, Candle in the Dark, the story of the first missionary, the first ever missionary to India. When he had arrived, the kind of social circumstances that were existing, how he was fighting his own British regime. Against the will of the company rule, he was trying to propagate religion. And that movie also tells you how it was possible for certain remote corners of India to become literates. How religion was actually used as a tool to promote literacy. So religion has got its own uses. It is not simply a binding force between the gods and the humans. Sometimes religion can also do certain social wonders, such as bringing literacy. Watch this movie, you'll really appreciate the kind of work that man was doing against his own people. Now, so at the time when I'm speaking about the origins, there was nothing like a discipline of anthropology when the British were trying to rule and understand different cultures. But it is from those initiatives of trying to understand the cultures, a small discipline started called culturology. This was called study of cultures. And over a period of time, people started getting enthusiastic about different things, about different cultures. And slowly, when the content increased, this particular term of anthropology actually originated. But then, initially, the discipline was seen as a subject that can be understood only by a few people, that can be perceived only by a few people. But then, slowly, things started to change. This is a very interesting thing. We see that across decades, things changed so much, technology changed so much. I think, this particular population that is existing today, you must have seen telephones that were really big, or you must have seen the arrival of the cellular phones, or you must have seen the shrinking size of the cellular phone, increasing technological wonders, increasing the travels. At a point of time when, crossing the ocean was a difficult thing, and now you're able to fly. So I think these generations have seen these wonders happening. We see that the distances are shrinking. People are moving from one continent to the other on a regular basis. There are no prejudices against crossing the oceans. When this is happening, various necessities have actually emerged. It is seen that initially there was more of a movement from the developed countries to the developing ones, and slowly other things caught up. For example, when the developed world was traveling to the developing, it may be for political rule to begin with, or it may be something like today we have this cultural tourism, or it may be for expansion of one's own businesses. So the purpose of movement varies. When it comes to developing to develop, maybe as a labor force, or maybe for educational purposes. But then there was more of a movement from the developed to the developing initially. But later the other one led to en masse movement of the entire communities, families to the developed world. Of course, occasionally certain stumbling blocks come up. When all this was happening, the relations across culture groups were increasing. Relations across nationalities were increasing. People found that for their own economic use, for their own political use, they have to understand the people they were ruling or they were dealing with. So when, say, the British was ruling, for better ruling, they needed to understand the people whom they were governing. Or some of them were there, they were only having this sheer curiosity. We are at this level of development. They are at such a low level of development. Why is it so? Maybe that academic curiosity was there. Reasons could be whatever. Some academic, some political, some economic, but everything boiled down to an effort to know different cultures. Sometimes what was happening was that, especially in the technological era, suddenly we realized that we lost our identity. It is at this point of time, certain culture groups started to feel that, okay, even before we understand the others, we'll have to understand our own selves. That is the reason why you can look at your syllabus, chapter 3, paper 2. It reads as, the structure of Indian social system. You actually are here learning what our own culture is. It's something like this. When you actually have to fight out your case against the others, maybe the other cultures, other peoples, you should have a substantial information, substantial understanding about our own selves. So here you understand that anthropology is doing two things for you. One is it is trying to tell you what your own culture is. Secondly, it is trying to tell us how you will have to look at the others. Now, when this whole thing was happening, there is a particular way in which anthropology as a theoretical discipline had emerged. Now, we will first have a look at the syllabus and then look at chapter 6, paper 1. There are some words there. This is the first half of the chapter. Let me caution you that the initial few days, about a week or so, about 4 or 5 days at least, you'll definitely have the discomfort because you're learning something that is new. But then any relationship requires time to blossom. It's like a new marriage you are into. There'll be ups and downs. There are things that you don't understand about her. She doesn't understand certain things about you, but then you'll have to see to it that you try to bridge the gap. So don't worry, this marriage will be a happy marriage between you and the discipline. And finally it will blossom and it will give you the result in the form of the marks that you want. That is the first part of your syllabus. I'm reading out for establishing that contact between the words and yourself. Evolutionism. Your syllabus actually in that document mentions classical and neo, but I have mentioned neo somewhere else. Classical evolutionism, diffusionism, and historical particularism. There is one name that is mentioned in the syllabus called Franz Boas. American diffusionism, functionalism. There is that man there, Malinowski, that's how you pronounce. Structural functionalism of Brown. Structuralism, there is this name called Levi-Strauss. You wear the jeans, Levi-Strauss, Levi's jeans, you know? Levi-Strauss, and then Edmund Leach. You have the other part there. And this particular segment of your anthropological thought called culture personality school, I personally like it very much because there's a whole lot of female anthropologists there. They don't do much of work, but then Ruth Benedict, Mead, Cardin is a male fellow, odd man out there, and then Cora Dubo, that's how you pronounce. Not just because certain letters are there, it is not mandatory that all the letters have to be pronounced. This is called Cora Dubo, S is silent there. Neo-evolutionism, there are a few other names there. Child, sir, spellings are very, very important. So during the weekend, you spend some time on the syllabus, especially you look at chapter 6, the names that are mentioned in the syllabus document. So that when I am dictating you something, you are not looking at me for the spelling. Child, C-H-I-L-D-E. Edmund White, Julian Stewart. This is called Salins. There is another name called Service. Sir, in this discipline, there are people who come in couple. I mean, Salins and Service, both male fellows, of course. Both of them, wherever they worked together. So it is like Lakshmikant parallel, inseparable fellows, Salins and Service. Even when questions come in the exam, they put them together. You have the other person called Marvin Harris, cultural materialism and symbolism. These are the other fellows of 21st century. Victor Turner, Schneider, Geertz. First of all, you should start pronouncing the names. Later you can learn about them. Cognitive thinkers, Tyler, Conklin. You have the other one called postmodernism. Now, when I'm dividing the syllabus into these two parts, I have divided them primarily based on the time period. So all these people up to culture personality school, these are called classical anthropological schools. These are all called classical anthropological schools, and the later are called modern anthropological theories. It's not simply the time period, but what the study also changed. Here we are seeing up to structuralism. These are called classical anthropological schools, and the later are called modern anthropological schools. One, because of time period. Second, because of the content. Third, because of the way they studied. Many people believe that it is difficult to convince a student when you are starting the syllabus with anthropological thought. Because through this chapter, we will have to see to it that the student thinks the way the thinker must have thought. Many times it is difficult for us to understand our own thought. We are talking about trying to understand somebody who is far from you, not simply in time, but in space, in nationality. But then the silver lining there is, all those people were actually trying to understand your own culture group. The blessing that we have is, we fall in the southern hemisphere. We come from Asia. We come from non-Western. Non-Western is the focal point of anthropological studies. They used to travel all the way to India and several other countries here like Indonesia, China, or Philippines, or Java. They used to come all the way, or Africa, in order to study the so-called less evolved cultures. Now, forget about what is there on the board. We'll talk something else for some time. I don't want to see gloomy faces. I'll pick up a familiar name. Srinivas. We have an anthropologist called M.N. Srinivas. M.N. Srinivas, as the name suggests, an Indian anthropologist. And if you look at this particular list of thinkers there, second from the bottom, R.C. Brown is called Radcliffe Brown. You must have heard of Radcliffe Line. That is that fellow, R.C. Brown. Srinivas actually studied under R.C. Brown in Oxford. At that time, so we are talking about a time of 1940s when he was a student there in Oxford. See, without knowing M.N. Srinivas, one cannot be an Indian anthropologist. If you are writing a UPSC exam with anthropology, you must know who M.N. Srinivas is. Without knowing him, there's no use writing. Because half of the second paper was given by him. That is his value. See, that was a time of 1940s when it was always thought that anthropology is a discipline that Westerners are studying the Easterners. Just imagine somebody from the Eastern world walking into a classroom in the Western world where the subject matter is the East. What kind of glorious welcome that he must have got there. The subject is walking to the classroom. You understand the value of him. And a person who was well versed with India, who lived in India, who knew the nitty-gritties of India, he was walking into a classroom where his society was the subject matter. So Brown was actually tutoring Srinivas about anthropology. Srinivas had his own problems, health issues, etc., etc. He could not go to some kind of remote African island, African country to do a study. Then Brown tells M.N. Srinivas that, see, you are the subject matter. You need not have to roam here and there. Go back to your own village. You study your own village. You write theses on your own village. That was the time when the definition of anthropology was changed from anthropology being a study of the other societies to anthropology a study of our own society. Okay? That is the reason why half of the time we will be trying to understand our own culture. Acha, did you read any of your religious scriptures? Hindu religious scriptures? Any Hindu religious scripture that you have studied? Or any Hindu religious scripture you have at home, though you never touched it? Bhagavad Gita. Your grandfather must have bought it and he left it for you. You have put it in the world bookshelf which you never open. Sometime, if at all you could take out some time, open such books that are already being eaten up by the termites. Take out, see what your scripture actually says. Actually, I love teaching theology, but somehow I'm teaching anthropology. So most of my classes will be something like religious discourses. And I love that early morning sessions on the television where white-clad women keep on saying religious things. No wonder one day you'll see me there talking about various religions. Then you'll say that, see, anthropology has other prospects also. You can be a theologist and you can whatever. Now, I have used one Indian anthropologist name that is called M.N. Srinivas. Today, if you go out and talk to somebody who is already studying sociology, if you use this name M.N. Srinivas, they claim him. They say that M.N. Srinivas is a sociologist, but you say that no, ma'am has said that he's an anthropologist. He's a via media. Originally, he was a sociologist. We started calling him social anthropologist. For our own benefit, we changed the labels of people. Till people got noble, we don't recognize them. Once we got a noble, we call them an Indian. It's something like that. We never recognized M.N. Srinivas till he was recognized as a sociologist. Then we started calling him social anthropologist. So you see that combination of thinkers will be there. We are also going to use names like Sigmund Freud in anthropology. Though he is not an anthropologist, we will be using him left, right, and center wherever we need him. Now, this is the classical anthropology. You have the other people here, a good lot of females. So it's something like this. When we are moving from classical to modern, there are certain things that were happening. But before I go into the trends of anthropological thought, I'll have to talk a bit about this person, fourth one from bottom there, cultural materialism. I'm not talking about materialism. I only am using this name here, Marvin Harris. So to begin with, one prominent name we used in the class was Huffman. The other name was Roy Rappaport, who had studied the Sembagan pig feasts. More women, more are the pigs. And then we moved on to the other names there, such as M.N. Srinivas, and a combination of him with somebody called Radcliffe Brown. Generally, what you are is an indication of either what your parent was or what your teacher was. The styles of writing, the styles of researches you actually take from your teacher. So Srinivas and R.C. Brown, they are inseparable from one another. Now I am introducing one other name here called Marvin Harris. I love this man because he has revolutionized the way anthropology books are actually written. So what we are going to do in the classes is, from time to time, we would be exhibiting certain textbooks so that you understand that, okay, these people really existed, not that we are talking about people who did not exist. Harris' specialization was India, actually. You can see that many of his books have umpteen number of pictures of India. One picture I personally love a lot from his books is the photograph that he had inserted there, where on the Indian road there is a natural speed breaker that is a buffalo or a cow. A cow sits on the road and you never object. See, if a traffic police is there, you may not stop. But if a cow is there, you'll stop. You'll see that you form an island around. The traffic actually forms an island around the cow. You won't disturb the cow. You revere it so much, you worship it so much that you wouldn't disturb it from the road. And that actually brings him to study, why is it the cow is so sacred for the Hindus? These days you must be reading a lot about cow, the sacredness, slaughtering, etc., etc. Why do you worship cow? Being a Hindu, one of the things that we worship is the cow. Why? Cow dung, urine of the cow, we worship everything there. So whenever there is a housewarming, you bring a cow, you take it around the house, make it urinate the house, and then so that you are purifying the house. Why is cow so sacred for us? You go to temples, you remember God, you believe in Him, occasionally also, no? Okay. Anyways, why is cow sacred for the Hindus? Not for you, but for the Hindus. Sir? Every god is in cow. Every god has emerged from the cow. Originally seen as Kamdhenu. Kamdhenu is the wish-fulfilling cow that is owned by whom? Vasishtha, but finally existing with whom? Shivana. ఆయన ఎక్కడి నుంచి వచ్చాడు మధ్యలో? ఆయన దగ్గర ఉంది నంది కదా, నాట్ ద ఫీమేల్ వెర్షన్. పోర్ థింగ్. Shiva has the male variant. The female version is with Indra. Very shrewd fellow, intelligent fellow, Aryan fellow. That actually belonged to this humble Brahmin was taken away by him. You must be knowing those stories, right? All those are mythological stories. Cow is the incarnation of Kamdhenu on the earth, the wish-fulfilling cow that is there in the Swarga. What is there in the Swarga? You know Swarga? Swarga, heaven and hell. What is there in the heaven? Indra is there, Kamdhenu is there, and we'll come to that. We are going to describe heaven and hell for you, so that you come to a conclusion on what has to be done, what should not be done in order to go either to heaven or to the hell. We are also going to talk about the mythological stories. What is a myth? M-Y-T-H, myth. Look at your syllabus, chapter 5, paper 1. Chapter 5, paper 1. You find this word there? Myth. Anybody? Simple English meaning. Haji sir. Something that cannot be factually proven. Something that is unreal. So write the definition of myth. So actually you are trying to write a dictionary of anthropology now. Myth is an untrue story. Myth is an untrue story that is believed to be true. That is believed to be true in order to maintain status quo. In order to maintain status quo. Status quo, situation as it is. I repeat, myth is an untrue story that is believed to be true in order to maintain status quo. So many times our religious books we find several mythological stories. Mythological meaning unreal. But then we are made to believe them so that something exists as it is. Now, I'll keep this aside for some time. We'll talk about a myth. I told you, in the class, we are only narrating stories. Set of stories becomes anthropology. There's a very popular myth that most of the Hindus believe in, or at least most of the Hindus must have heard about. Brahma, the creator, he has 4. It symbolizes that he can see the entire world at the same time. It's for the convenience of the common man's understanding that we gave 4 heads to Brahma. He may not be having, but it's symbolically to indicate that Brahma sees everything from every corner of the universe. There is one very interesting mythological story in Hinduism called Purusha Sukta. Must have heard about Purusha Sukta. Purusha Sukta, I'll write it on the board. Doesn't matter. A lot of Hinduism we are going to learn in the class. We would try to become the Hindus in the class. Purusha Sukta is actually a part of Rig Veda. Rig Veda, 10th mandala. That is a narration of the origin, the creation of the Chatur Varnas that you have. Look at chapter 3, paper 2. Chapter 3, paper 2. In the first line itself, you find this word, Varnashrama. Of course, when we go to those chapters, we are going to see various theories how Varna must have originated. I am only trying to introduce to you one of the meanings of myths. Myth is an untrue story that is made to be believed by the people so that one can maintain the status quo. Generally, you don't want things to change. When you don't want things to change, you will have to bring in something related to supernatural so that people will not question. In the Hindu society, we have one of these stratifications called Varna stratification. And it is believed that the 4 Varnas, the Chatur Varnas, have originated from the body of the Supreme Brahma. Must have heard of this. One fine day when Brahma was sitting, all these things were created. From the face came the Brahmanas, and from the shoulders came the Kshatriyas. From the thighs originated Vaishyas, and the feet came the Shudras. And the people who are not there from all the 4, they are untouchables. The Panchamas. Now, you cannot go back in time and establish that at so and so point of time back in history, Brahma was sitting at such and such place and was giving rise to these 4 Varnas. That's where our friend was saying, factually you cannot prove. The truth cannot be proved, but then we are made to believe so that this stratification continues to exist. The moment you question the mythological story, you are challenging the stratification that was created by those stories. That is the danger. Many times in the childhood, I don't know what kind of upbringing you had, but then most of the homes we see that you're not supposed to question. You're not supposed to question. Accept the things as are said to you. Do the things as were ordered. The moment you start questioning this, the entire fabric of the society is actually to move and change. How this process of change occurred in Indian society, and in general, what could be the factors that might challenge the status quo, that is the inquiry of anthropology. I said in the beginning that anthropology is a study of culture, is a study of other cultures. In anthropological thought, we are going to see how different schools try to understand the cultures. I repeat what I said. Anthropology is a study of culture. That is the subject matter. This subject matter of culture, how different schools have tried to understand using different ways of approaching cultures, is anthropological thought. How the aspect of culture was studied by different schools, what is the kind of approach they were using, what could be the research methodologies they must be using. So using different tools, how different schools were trying to study culture is anthropological thought. Am I clear to you? So they were trying to give certain theories. Through these theories, they were trying to tell us, see, this is what is culture. Is that clear? Is that clear? I repeat what I said. The discipline of anthropology has the subject matter. The subject is culture. Whether your culture, their culture, whatever. Or in simple terms, it is the study of peoples. Our own society, our own peoples are the other peoples. When you are studying the people, the culture, what kind of approach you are using, there can be a series of different kinds of approaches. All these approaches put together becomes anthropological thought. What a researcher is thinking about the culture is anthropological thought. Am I clear to you? In the process, what happens is, See, when you're now sitting in the 21st century and trying to comment on how a thinker in the 18th century or early 19th century must have written, you'll have to understand that there's so much of time gap, technology gap, understanding gap. So when he was writing, if you're reading it now, it looks to be very irrational, unscientific. But then you will have to understand what he is saying in his cultural, technological setting. Now, what happened was that I'm trying to come to the trends of anthropological thought. Earliest anthropologists, mostly the British, they tried to understand cultures mostly by reading what people must have written during their journeys. They themselves are not going. See, suppose I belong to an 18th century or early 19th century anthropology discipline. I was not traveling, but I was trying to get information right into my office, into my library, from the people who must be traveling. Maybe an officer was posted somewhere. There is a very important name when I say that officer posted somewhere. There was somebody called J.P. Mills. J.P. Mills, an administrator, an anthropologist who was posted in the Naga district that was in the 1930s and 1940s. J.P. Mills, a person who produced a very interesting anthropological account of the tribes of the Naga region. Before he actually wrote books on the Nagas, people within India itself did not know that there are so many tribes within the Nagas. We did not know that Naga is only the name of a region. There are so many Naga communities there. Like, some of the names on which he was writing, there was something called Angami Naga. There was something called Aonaga. So many variants were there. These are the two popular books of J.P. Mills, Angami Nagas, Aonagas. There is one more essay that he had written called the Lota Naga, Lota. So it's like somebody who had seen on the field so many variants he was able to bring to the notice of the rest of the people. But then see, in the earliest times, anthropologists were not moving out. They were sitting in their libraries, trying to get information from the people who were traveling. Or maybe they were sending their students. Students are the vulnerable lot. So students, they were sending to the places across the world, asking them to get an account of there. Or travelers were there, Christian missionaries were there. So such kind of studies produced by the travelers, these people were depending on them. They were not visiting the fields, but they were, that's where I'm using one word here called the armchair anthropologists. The earliest anthropologists were called armchair anthropologists. You know armchair? Armchair? No? Which your father, your grandfather used to have, no? So that you can relax. Armchair, Madata Kurchi, wherein you can actually sleep. You must have sat on it actually to study, but slowly you would doze off. Armchair anthropologists.
Is there anyone who judges the interpretation of anthropologists?
We will come to that. That's there in the process. We'll come to that. So the earliest people were actually writing without visiting, nicknamed as armchair anthropologists. So you can say that you can actually know the authenticity of what they are writing. They were trying to write about the people about whom somebody else have written. So authenticity becomes a big question. But then you'll have to appreciate it. The earliest anthropologists were such voracious, gluttonous writers. Some people have this quality of writing reams of information. It becomes difficult for them to write anything in 250 words restricted. They cannot compromise with the quantity, 2,500 words, not less than that. When UPSC asks you to write in 250 words, it becomes difficult for them. There are different kinds of people who can talk a lot but can't write much. But UPSC appreciates people who can write and talk as well. No, our target is to write, of course. These people were such beautiful writers. At this stage, I will have to introduce you to one person. Look at your syllabus document, chapter 6, paper 1. Classical anthropologists there. Classical evolutionism. What is the description given there? In the classical evolutionism, what are the names incorporated? Tyler, Morgan, and Fraser. I love among all the person called Fraser. You can see there, Tyler, Fraser, the British fellows, Morgan, the American fellow. There are several other names that I have incorporated here, though your syllabus is not mentioning them. I would want to have a word about Fraser, but before that, maybe you can scribble somewhere the nationalities of these people, though I haven't started your syllabus, but then. Only 3 names are given in your syllabus. Tyler, Fraser, and Morgan. There are other people, Maine, Bachofen, and Bastian. They are not abuses, they are names. These 3 are given in the syllabus because they are considered to be the stalwarts, big people. When they say big people, meaning that they wrote big books, voluminous, must have done something very remarkable. So the discipline was at a stage when quantity matters, not quality. Initially it is like that. I was saying that the earliest anthropologists were armchair fellows. They didn't move out of their comforts of the libraries and homes of the universities. They depended on people who were traveling. So the travelers' accounts, travelogues as we call, travelers' accounts were the primary basis. Or somebody as an administrator was seeing people and writing, those were the basis. All this work of going to the people, studying them, if at all you are going to the people and studying them, any tribe that comes to your mind right now, randomly? Gond, okay. So if somebody wants to write on the Gond, there can be several approaches. One approach could be you can sit in the library, read all the books that were written on the Gond and write a summary. And you can present your paper. Most of the anthropological work, especially in India these days, is that way. So somebody commented anthropology had died out. But of course there are universities. You must have heard of this Northeast Hill University, Nehu, continuing to do the remarkable work there. Now, suppose you want to write about Gond from the library, that is one approach. Or you can actually visit the field, you can visit them on the field and write about them. This particular thing is called field work. You go to the field and study the culture group. Look at chapter 8, paper 1. Fieldwork traditions in anthropology. In studying anthropological thought, we are going to see what kind of fieldwork methods and traditions have emerged. So you can study going from the library, you can go to the field and study. So at the time of the earliest anthropological writings, field work was almost not existing. But people were writing huge volumes of books. One person who is really special was Fraser. Remember this man for his very remarkable book by name, The Golden Bough. Golden Bough was written by Fraser. It is not one book, but a series of 12 volumes. Many times we find it difficult to write one essay of 500 words. Look at people who are writing each volume running into about 500 pages, writing about 12 volumes there. And that too, the books of that time, they used to write in such a small font. Paper was something that was very costly. You had to think on those lines too. But suppose you see the books of today, very less content, more of pictures, more of colors. Sarugu takwa, hadavid ekkuva. But then, those were the times when they used to write so much of information, never thought of writing in shortcuts, elaborate descriptions. I am here using the word of Fraser, James Fraser, because James Fraser, one of the earliest anthropologists, was instrumental in bringing people from different other disciplines into anthropology. So initially when you are starting something, the inflow of people is very important. When the discipline is in the initial stages, what you need is the manpower to support it. Fraser, who was he has written tens of books, I must say. Out of tens of books, Golden Bough was one that had 12 volumes. To write these 12 volumes, he took about 10 years. While he was writing Golden Bough, parallelly he was writing several other books also. It was like oka pedda cinema teestunanu Bahubali, chinna chinna pakkana ala veltu unnai. Several small movies here and one big one. And this Golden Bough was written about so many tribes from across the world, because Fraser was one of the first anthropologists who started going to the field. He was not simply going to the field. He had tens of people who were trying to pump information from different points in the world. So you can see that each of the volume that he was writing was having tens and hundreds of names. And the way he was writing, that's what we call flair of writing. It was so attractive that people from other disciplines opted out of their own discipline and started writing, studying anthropology. Are you here in the class? Fine in the class? Okay? Maybe to confidently say that you are fine, it will take some time. Go back, see what we have written so far in today's class. I haven't ended my class. It's only that, to see whether you have. I started by giving my format of the classes, and we said that we would be introducing certain words. We had introduced three words rather, ethnology, ethnography, and ethnocentrism. Those will actually now be discussed when we are talking about the trends in anthropological thought. I have given you a brief idea about emergence of anthropology. We said that it is something to do with colonial interests, and when intercultural, international relations have increased, the requirement of knowing the other people had increased, and hence the requirement of anthropology. That is the practical utility. But when it comes to the theoretical origins, for any discipline to progress, there has to be a strong theoretical basis. That is the reason why in most of the social sciences you see the thought, geographical thought, political science has a thought, or sociology has a thought. Every social science you pick up, there is one topic that is called thought or theories, because theories form the foundation of that particular discipline. As a part of anthropological thought, its emergence, now we are looking at the earliest anthropological thinkers. And some names I have shown there. About the first one that I have spoken is Fraser, the person who had written tens of books and was instrumental in the arrival of several others into the discipline. But see, so the earliest fellows, we were calling them armchair fellows because they were not going out of their comfort zones. You will see in one of the videos that will be shown to you in the next week, there was one anthropologist who was saying this. The earliest anthropologists believed that the primitive man has to be studied from a safe distance. The primitive man has to be studied from a safe distance. Sir, examiner can easily understand whether you have understood the spirit of anthropology or not. Whether you have understood the spirit of anthropology or not. This he can do simply by the way you have used certain words in your answers. For example, this very word primitive was a word that was very primitive in anthropology. In contemporary anthropology, usage of the word primitive is actually not encouraged. Primitive has a negative tone in it. If somebody says that you are a primitive person, it's not an accolade. It is something like an abuse. When somebody says that you behave like a savage, an uncivilized fellow, savage is not a title that is given to you. So when you are describing somebody as a primitive tribe or primitive group or somebody with the adjective of being primitive, it is negative. So in contemporary anthropology, what is accepted is describing somebody as a simple society, not as a primitive society. They are simple, you are complex. So when you are describing yourself, there is a negative tone there. You are a complex fellow. So when you are calling somebody simple, it is appreciating what they actually have. We see that one of the earliest books that was written in anthropology was Primitive Culture. Now you cannot sit and write a book of primitive culture. That was the time when vocabulary was being introduced. People were busy writing from their libraries. They felt that it is better you study the primitive from a safe distance. Now, at this stage in anthropology, we can sit and think, was it a safe distance for the theorist or for the people? Because the day the researchers, the administrators started approaching the so-called primitive man, their primitiveness vanished, their simplicity vanished, and everything that is negative from the mainstream entered their life. In the future, we are going to see what should be the distance that we will have to maintain from the so-called simple societies. Or is it really possible to maintain that distance? All this is going to be our subject matter later. Now, going back here to Fraser. Fraser was one of the earliest field workers. He started visiting the field. Now, when you have started this process of visiting the fields, this can be of different types. Maybe you can go there on maybe a holiday, spend a couple of days, see how people are there. Or maybe you spend a few hours there just to note down what kind of things that you are noticing there. Or maybe you decided to stay for a while. You have a separate quarter of yourself. Maybe you're calling people, you're summoning people to your quarter, your tent, asking them questions, asking them to tell about them. Or maybe you started to live in their hamlets, in their own houses. Though they were not really happy with you staying there, you wanted to stay there. Many times that happens. We don't want people to stay with us, but they stay with us. Though you are not really welcome, you started to stay there, wanted to win them over, wanted to live the way they were living. And in order to convince that, yes, we are totally yours, you get married to them. So there's different grades there. There may be distant studies, you're not going out. You are going, but occasionally, once in a while. You are staying there, but you are not losing your own identity. Or in an extreme case, you are giving up your own identity, merging with them in order to study and understand them. This is the journey of anthropological thought. Have patience more to continue? ఈ రోజుకి చాలు వచ్చే సంచికలో. Generally our class runs for 3 hours. No interval in between. So you will have to build your physical and mental strength in order to sit in the class. See, many times I try to have some kind of entertaining thing in the class, but not every time that may be possible. Suppose I'm discussing somebody's problems. I cannot have a spice in somebody's problems. So a problem has to be seen as a problem, and you will have to learn to empathize with the people who are facing the problem. That is the reason why I push the tribal problems towards the end of the course, so that I can entertain you thoroughly. And once you think that enough of entertainment, you can enter into the problems. But then you will have to see to it that you keep on writing things. Writing is very, very important, each and every example for that matter. But any introductory class of anthropological thought is not complete without we having a look at this man. E.B. Taylor. A man that lived in the 1800s. Sir, what we do is, when we do anthropological thought, we also try to give the lifetime, so that you understand from which particular time period he is, what could be the economic and political setting of that time. When he was living, in most of the other disciplines also, men who looked like him were existing with so many beards, and beard is a symbol of thinking man. There's no time to shave also. Of course, at that time the razor was not discovered yet, so people were finding it very difficult to shave. It is better to leave it that way. You'll see, interesting things in the discipline, how technology has changed. By the time you come to the second school in anthropology called diffusionism, you see people with clean shaves coming, meaning that yes, there was shaving kit that was discovered. Of course, by the time you come to Marvin Harris, people without mustache also. Diffusionism was people with no masculinity being possessed in the form of a mustache. But later, gender becomes a not so very interesting thing. People started shaving off their mustache also, and then that was the time when people were talking about equal rights to men and women. Now, sir, what happened during the process of studying anthropological theories or cultures was that, say a person like Taylor was coming up with his own idea, an approach, a theory. Why and how people became what they are. In that inquiry, he was trying to give his own views and giving his own theory. A a bunch of people started coming up to criticize what this thinker must have written. So the next theorist that came actually had the criticism of the earlier one as the basis. On the basis of criticizing the previous fellow, you are giving your theory. You might be introducing new methodologies, new researches, new fieldworks, and you gave your own theory. In the process of giving your own theory, you also made some mistakes. From those mistakes, the next theory originated. So this cycle of criticizing the earlier fellows, giving your own theory, conducting researches, and giving your own fieldworks, in the process you are doing mistakes and the next fellow is coming up. This is one thing that was, so that's the reason why the theories emerged from the mistakes of the theorist, of the earlier theorist. This is not simply that. In the journey of anthropological thought, there was a very interesting trend that had been noticed. The earliest fellows were not simply moving out of their libraries, but they were the people who wanted to study the culture groups extensively. Meaning that pick up any tribe for that matter, they wanted to go into the details of all the things that they came across. Maybe their religious system, maybe their political system, maybe their ecological system. So they were trying to go into the details of every small, primarily sociological thing. But of course we will notice that each of these earliest thinkers, especially when you are looking at the classical evolutionism, each of them had got their own special area of interest. Though they were trying to describe the entire culture group, they were having their own special interest in one or a few cultural things. For example, I was talking about Fraser. Fraser had a specialization in magic and religion. So if you want to be a magician tantricist, or if you want to be a magician, you will have to definitely study the golden bough. And the magic works. Magic works. I don't know whether you have gone to any magician. Magician as in, it can be a sorcerer. Hyderabad is a home of several sorcerers. In Telangana, we have different variants of magic. Even near Tangband, there is one magician that sits in the Durga temple there, Kattamaisama temple. And we see that the magic works. Different kind of magical practices for different exams. For UPSC, one kind. For Group 1, one kind. For Group 2, one kind. Tougher the exam, tough will be the rituals. The price also varies anyway. But once you understand the whole thing, you would prefer to be a magician rather than a civil servant, because it really works. Now, what I was saying was that earliest thinkers, they wanted to study the whole culture. But from among the whole culture, they were trying to identify a few specializations for themselves. For example, this man, Taylor. Without him, there cannot be an anthropology discipline. He is called the first culturologist. Some people also describe him as father of anthropology. You should not ask for mother, who did not exist at that time. Mothers came much later in culture personality school. There is one lady called Margaret Mead. She is called mother of anthropology. So there's so much of time gap, a century gap between mother and father. You will have to know about Taylor at least a couple of things. Not simply that he was an armchair anthropologist. He was somebody who was, in a way, created discipline. At that time called culturology. He was inventing vocabulary. Today, if you go to any bookshop, you ask for a dictionary of anthropology, by default, he would hand over E.B. Taylor's dictionary to you. He was writing this in late 1800s. And even after so many decades, the book is still valid. So even if you are trying to look at some other dictionary of anthropology, hardly a few words must have been added in that. When he is giving a dictionary, it means that he is defining new terms, he is giving you a vocabulary. The vocabulary is very, very important. Understanding the meaning of the words is very, very important, especially when you're studying a new discipline. Because, a discipline like anthropology, for that matter, there will be many terms there that look very, very familiar to you. For example, look at chapter 5, paper 2. In chapter 5, paper 2, towards the end of the chapter, you find certain words such as westernization. Westernization. Suppose somebody is answering a question on westernization. The very fanciful thing in anthropology is he can simply give a word. And you are at the receiving end, what to write, what not to write. Westernization for 200 words. If you are not a student of anthropology also, you will be able to write an answer on westernization by what you generally understand as westernization. But when it comes to the discipline of anthropology, the term westernization has got its own special meaning. So examiner can really understand whether you have studied the concept of westernization as a part of anthropology or you are trying to answer it just like that. So many times subject specific meanings will be there. Now coming to Taylor, when he was inventing a dictionary for you, he was trying to define things in a very interesting way. He had given the definition of the term religion, which is still considered acceptable. I'm only trying to give a couple of words, but then you will see that he coined new words to establish the discipline. For me, I love the definition that he has given of religion and the definition that he has given for the word soul. Soul, S-O-U-L, not S-O-L-E. Soul. You have a soul? You have a soul? I think 2-3 days ago, Hindu had an article. The souls do not die out. Scientists are saying that they go and merge with the Supreme somewhere. You have seen souls moving? No. Taylor describes souls. We will see in the next class how Taylor was defining a soul. The definitions that Taylor had given, especially the movie industry had thoroughly understood them. The way they picturize the souls in the movies is exactly the same way in which Taylor had actually defined the word. So what happens is that whenever we are trying to study about any thinker for that matter, we will have to keep in view a few things which you may make a note of them. Any thinker for that matter, or any school that we are going to study, one is the 5-6 bullet points that you may make a note so that we will follow almost the same format. One will be the academic background of the thinker, the academic and professional background of the thinker. Why I'm saying this is, every thinker is not an anthropologist. Every thinker has no basic education in anthropology. Somebody may be from ecology, somebody may be from life sciences, somebody may be from engineering. So don't worry, engineers here, don't worry. You are a fit case to take up anthropology as a subject. So first thing is his professional and academic background, his or her. Secondly, the literary contributions. Each writer must have written tons of books if we are talking about a 19th century writer. As time went forth. By the time we came to 21st century, we can see that anthropologist is emerging from a single book also. There can also be a time you presented one paper, you became an anthropologist. Literary sources. You will not be memorizing them, but you will learn them. Like who wrote Golden Bough? Fraser. You know it? That's something like that. And primitive culture? This man wrote. You don't know who E.B. Taylor is, but you know that he wrote a book. Thirdly, the concepts given by the thinker. The concepts given by the thinker and the fieldworks. Fieldworks in the sense which all communities he must have visited, he must have wrote about. And the concepts. For example, I was telling you, this man was defining what religion is. Or somebody else was writing about magic. When Fraser was writing about magic, he was writing about what could be the types of magic, or what kind of practitioners are there in the magic. Interesting discourses will be there. Look at chapter 5, paper 1. Chapter 5, paper 1, last line. You have religious practitioners. Did you notice that? Religious practitioners. Chapter 5, paper 1, last line. Religious practitioners. Good varieties are there. Can you read out? Religious functionaries. Priest, shaman, medicine man, sorcerer. Which? Whom do you like? Which? Which one do you like? Kind of. Interestingly, out of the 5 that are mentioned, which is the only specialization of a female? All the rest of them are male specializations. This is not accidentally placed in chapter 5. All these are the variants that Fraser had meticulously described, with how different communities have different kinds of shamans, different kinds of witches, how they operate. When I say magic works, it really works. It really does work. We tried it many times, especially on the exam day. You don't want your friend, not your enemy, you don't want your friend to clear the exam. Enemies anyway you don't want them to clear, but friend also. When you don't want your friend to clear the exam, just leave some nimbu and mirchi and all the kinds of stuff in front of his door. The moment he opens the door to go to the exam, his heart sinks. Though he is a person who doesn't believe in any superstition, any things like a supernatural, all the way through, when he is writing answers in the exam, the same nimbu comes in front of his eyes. Magic works. Fraser has demonstrated it. So he has given several concepts there. So concepts, fieldwork. And fourthly, critique of the fieldwork techniques. Fieldwork techniques and research methodologies. Fieldwork techniques and research methodologies. Fieldwork techniques and research methodologies. So some of them are described in chapter 8, paper 1. Fieldwork techniques, research methodologies. If you can look at them. Chapter 8, paper 1. There is a list given, such as interviews, questionnaires, case studies, etc., etc. Good lot of them. That is the reason why we do chapter 6 and paper 8 and chapter 8 together. They are inseparable, fieldwork and anthropological thought. And the fifth one, critique of the theory, and lastly counter-critique. Critique and counter-critique. Don't ever leave any answer without an appreciation of the thinker. How much ever novice the theory is, how much ever irrational the theory is, at the end of the day, the theory reflects the time period. The theory reflects how people were thinking at that point of time in history. And it definitely must have contributed to people who have progressed and improvised the whole thing. This is the basic format. I would also want to introduce one other name before I call off the session today. Now, when I was saying that Fraser was instrumental in bringing several people to anthropology. Look at the third one from bottom. Because you see, from tomorrow when we start our journey in anthropological thought, there will be times when you feel low. There will be times when you think that how irrational the fellows were. When such thoughts come into your mind, I'll have to show that there is somebody who is going to come in the future who would change the time, change the discipline. So right from the day one, you start waiting for this man to come, Malinowski, like people keep waiting for Jesus to come. Malinowski, he would come one day and change the discipline till eternity. Because Malinowski was the first fellow who had revolutionized the fieldwork. He made it mandatory for an anthropologist to conduct fieldwork before he writes. He always believed that seeing is believing. Without seeing, you cannot write. Without seeing, if you are writing, there is no authenticity. What you see might change from time to time, but seeing is important. It is here I would want to explain two words. The earliest writers were having the style of ethnological writing. The earliest writers were having ethnological style. By the time you come to Malinowski, ethnography becomes a reality. Though before Malinowski, people have tried writing ethnographies, he makes it a systematic writing. Ethnographic writing was more systematized by Malinowski. Earliest writers were ethnological. Go back to the definition to see there. Ethnology is the detailed writing of a culture group. With comparison, there is a tendency of ethnocentrism. So if at all somebody from classical evolutionism were writing, definitely they were writing ethnologies. They were writing comparatively. So a British writer would always compare the culture group with his own culture. Comparison, of course, is a human thing. Once you are born human, you definitely compare. You cannot live without comparing. It is not simply comparing. Whenever you are comparing, you will try to grade the people. You will try to grade the cultures. Comparison may be for different reasons, but generally you are comparing so that to say that, okay, I am superior or they are superior. Earliest writings were having this kind of a negative tendency of feeling that their own culture is superior. So earliest writings were not simply ethnological, that is not simply comparative. They were also judging the other cultures. We will see the kind of derogatory terminology used by the earliest writers to describe their subject. If the earliest writer was calling somebody primitive, calling somebody a savage, an uncivilized fellow, it means that it is a derogatory way of, ethnocentric way of writing. So earliest writers were ethnological. They were having this judging attitude or grading attitude. But by the time you come to Malinowski, he was the one who says that you will have to write what you observe on the field. And you try to write without any judgments. That is ethnographic writing that was promoted by Malinowski. And Malinowski was that person who came into anthropology by reading about Fraser. By reading about Fraser, James Fraser's Golden Bough. By reading about Golden Bough, he becomes an anthropologist. When I resume my class tomorrow, I would start with something called what can be an accident. You being here in the class, is it an accident? You choosing anthropology, is it an accident? Or when Malinowski becomes an anthropologist, is it an accident? Accident doesn't mean that it has a negative tone. It is not that way. Something that is intentional, something that is unintentional. Many times we become what we are accidentally. You wanted to become something else, but you became something else. That is an accident. So we'll try examining on those lines. We will have a few more words to begin with in tomorrow's class. The first half hour, I will be introducing one tribal profile to you. I have in that introductory class mentioned that along with that sequence of topics, I said we will be doing certain ethnographic profiles. Now you understand the word ethnography. Ethnography is a detailed writing about a culture group without comparison. And I told you at that time that we will be doing profiles of several tribal communities so that the stock information is ready with you. So first half hour we will be playing some kind of a video so that you start noting down things from the video, and we will be discussing about that particular tribe. Then I will take you to anthropological thought. We will have a brief talk about several other thinkers randomly, and we will be starting with the classical evolutionism. What is the meaning of evolution? Whether Darwin was instrumental in bringing anthropology as a discipline, who all were influenced by Darwin, and how other thinkers have challenged Darwin, and things how they have changed. This is what is going to be our class. Okay? Thank you so much for being there in the first class. Good day.